Good morning, good afternoon, Value First Nation. Welcome to another episode of Value First Leadership with Mr. Tony Dowling. How you doing, Tony?
Good morning, good afternoon. If you're my side of the world, as I like to say, I'm okay. Do you know, this is my last week, formally last week in work. When you work for yourself, you're never really off on holiday, but this is my last formal week, and I'm starting to feel it a bit, Chris. I'm starting to wind down a little bit. So yeah, looking forward to a nice Christmas break and a couple of days lie in, bit of catch up of sleep and all that kind of thing. But excited for today's conversation as always.
A well-deserved break. Uh, I'd say for most anybody living in this world right now, trying to figure out what's going on with AI, how to lead through it. Obviously, that's what we're focused on
Mm.
in this show, and uh, I think after the break, we'll get into some maybe more practical like
Yeah.
implementation stuff. But yesterday I finally started drafting this article with Claude. Um, well, it turned into an article like it always does. I always end up creating something. But it was really about this question of, and I think the easiest way to put it is something as simple as the statement, failing to plan is planning to fail.
Mm.
Is that true? And like, if it wasn't, like, man, does that blow up like most of everything that we've learned about just how to survive in business, but also how to be successful. And, I'm always weary that I'm not trying to like just justify the way I want to do things because I've never been great at planning and goal setting and all this stuff. But this stems from a place and talked about this on the HubSpot helpline on Friday with Kyle. Uh, and like when you see people still like putting effort into building slides,
Mm.
right? When I am learning every day how a simple prompt can make an interactive digital experience come to life, especially if we think about moments where we're trying to get buy-in and we're trying to make it look nice and all these things, it's like, what are we doing building slides, Tony?
Mm. Mm. I think it's a fascinating question, and the title, uh, do we have to unlearn everything? The title of of today's show is it's just huge. It's just a massive idea. But I don't think it's a new idea, and nothing under the sun is new, as they say. And I think it's also deeply rooted in our personalities, which is probably why I find it so interesting. Now, as a leader, I think we are particularly vulnerable to staying in our lane, right? So a lot of people talk about comfort zones, and a lot of people talk about how dangerous comfort. Sorry, not how dangerous comfort zones are. A lot of people talk about how much growth happens outside of your comfort zone, and you stretch and all these things, right? But it's naturally deeply uncomfortable for us. Our nature, I think, is to strive for the comfort zone and to strive for. If you look at something like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, something as ubiquitous as that, right? He flips it at the end when he starts to talk about self-actualization. But all of the foundational steps are about safety and heat and light and food and societal. It's really our drives are to become comfortable, as it were. But say from a business perspective, particularly, but from all sorts of other prehistoric perspectives, you took the same walk that you've sort of batted down through the bush from your hut to the watering hole every day, and you're going to get some big furry nasty's going to jump out and get you, because it's going to be waiting for you because it knows you go back and forth that same work. And the same thing in business. But it's interesting how during the industrial phase, during industry 1.0, actually the that strive to become comfortable, or put it another way, the strive to optimize everything, the strive to tighten everything down, the strive to articulate everything, document everything, replicate everything. It's really understandable. It's really understandable because we have simple machines, we have simple consumers, we have simple manufacturers, and now everything is just accelerating really, really quickly. So say I found this is a massive question, and it really plays. I've been reading. I don't know if you've read the books, the Neuromancer books by William Gibson, the so-called father of cyberpunk.
Okay.
He's written half a dozen books, but the three I'm reading, I'm on at the moment, are the Neuromancer is the first one, and it's credited with inventing cyberspace. So there's a point to this. the point that Gibson wrote about, like in the 80s or the 90s, before there was an internet, and certainly before there was cyberspace, and before there was AI, even though he's talking about AI then, is how are our behaviors going to change? And that's the crucial thing, right? What's not going to happen most likely is we're not going to rise up and tear down AI. These patterns that are becoming established, we're going to react to. We're going to absorb. We're going to respond. We're going to evolve, right? We're going to evolve because of the stuff that we'll have. Now, if you're going to bumble along in your comfort zone on that same trail back and forth the hut and the water, or making the same product that you've always made, or serving the same market and the same customer that you've always served, you're not going to see this stuff coming. So while I think there is absolutely a case for repetition builds reputation, getting things right iteratively, then there's absolutely a case, particularly from a leadership perspective, to keep your head up, to see what's coming down the path. I think that's the crucial part, and to almost actively avoid the comfort zone. So if you look at it in terms of the product life cycle, you usually have an introduction phase, a growth phase, a maturity phase, and a decline phase. That's it, right? Every single product goes through that process. The only way you're not going to go through that is, while you're in maturity, is to unlearn what you've been doing and go and do something else, to pivot or to whatever you want to call it. And there's never been a time like there is now with our ability to do that. The ability to model, the ability to research, the ability to craft prototypes and test prototypes and so on and so on. It's just not an expensive thing anymore. It's just not rooted in those constraints, as you would call it, those constraints of the past. So this fascinating philosophical question is really pertinent today because everything's changed, because the way that we have to view those constraints has changed as well.
Yeah. And like I said, I'm drafting
That's cool.
some kind of document that will be published at some point. And so we're going to go through a few of these because definitely, as you're working with AI, it'll help you think in whichever direction you want to go. So I'm going to put this in front of some people, including Tony. And we'll go over maybe some obvious ones, but maybe some less obvious ones. Definitely, they're all up for debate. There's so much nuance in all of this. And but it often has to do with the constraint of why these things were generated as kind of best practice advice, or tried and true aspects of the day to day. So fail to plan to fail. This was assuming the constraint is that execution is expensive. Mistakes are costly to fix. Information took time to gather, and planning was how you reduced risk before committing resources. What's changed? When you can research, prototype, iterate, and pivot in hours instead of weeks, planning becomes overhead, and the risk shifts from acting without a plan to planning without acting. And the new reality, orientation matters more than planning. And I've talked about this. It's kind of like the idea of North Star. As long as you have that, right? And then if you can allow yourself to act in the moment and adjust in real time, AI enables that in a way that we've never experienced before. And it can lead to some really amazing, 100% unplanned, unexpected outcomes that can create a lot of value. Yeah.
Now, there are people out there. On Myers Briggs, I come out as a INTJ. In disc, if you're interested in the disc stuff, I'm a D type, which will probably be not much of a surprise to anybody. But all those things point to the fact that you can almost describe I'm like this now. I don't like planning. I think probably like you, Chris. I'm not big on detail, and it was really funny because as a successful salesperson, I became a sales manager, like a lot of successful salespeople do. And then I kind of took to telling my reps, you got to have a plan. You got to have a plan, which was really ironic because I never did. But what I realized I did have was the North Star. I had somewhere I was going, and sometimes that was really vague, right? But there are those of us who are the opposite to that. They need to know. My colleague Mark, my business partner, he can't. I know he can't cope with the way I work, and I can't cope with the way he works because he's meticulous. He will have it written down. He will, and we're both kind of discovering AI together, and it's fascinating how much it brings us closer in terms of those. So that personality type, right, or the behavioral type, or whatever. My detail is empowered by AI. I go, throw some plans together, and out the plan comes. I can send it to Mark, and he can go, yeah, check, that looks good, and he can give me the summary. He can lay out his long, in-depth analysis and what he wants to go. So there's that aspect to this one as well. And as you say, it is very nuanced. And the question becomes, why do you need a plan? And strategists will tell you you need that plan. But out of all those businesses out there today, how many of them even have a strategy, much less a sticking to the strategy? I think me and you, we're amongst those who know the truth of this scenario. So it's definitely it's out the window. For me, it's completely out the window. I'm not even sure it was ever the case. And it's certainly
Right.
not the case. The constraint, that's what brings it to, when research is really expensive, when doing all this stuff like in real life is really expensive. You did, like, there's another one on there I know I've seen, the old measure twice and cut once, which maybe we'll talk about. You knew why. You absolutely knew why. But I built an app. I was saying to you earlier, I built an app on Friday on Lovable for the first time. It's blown my mind. I've read. It's boring because I know everybody says it. But I'm as far away from being a coder as you can be. I'm a HubSpot partner, but I'm not a coder. I can build workflows, but I don't know how to write code. Yet there I am. I've built an app. I haven't built it. I've prompted an app that integrates with HubSpot and pulls a load of information out that I want and details it nicely. And it's just like it is literally game changing. Literally game
Yeah.
changing. So
Yeah.
so this is where I love what you're saying about unlearning things. You now have to unlearn. You have to unlearn and almost relearn, and then probably unlearn again because you don't want to get stuck. Whatever we do, let's not get stuck. Let's keep moving forward with it.
Yeah.
It's a really exciting
No,
time to
I
be in.
think, you know, it does. You say you hear everybody saying it. We're in such a small, like, feels like this echo chamber where it is kind of that way. But then you step outside of it, and so many people are just so far away from this place, that yeah, it, to watch somebody get on with AI that's been the strategist, that's
Yeah,
been the person that can understand markets like at scale, and then they don't have to rely on developers and all these other people, right? Um, one, it gets you to a place where, again, you get to the outcomes much faster, and then you can collaborate with those same people to then, build on top of that, instead of starting with like these brainstorming activities. And like, this is another one, right? set
Mm,
set smart goals. The constraint, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time bound. This framework assumed stable environments where you could
mm,
predict what would matter in 90 days. What's changed? Time bound becomes the problem when conditions shift faster than calendars turn. A goal set in January may be irrelevant by March, not because you failed, but because you've learned. The new reality, and I've been having success with this in my own scoping agreements, like, because it just makes sense. Like,
mm,
when you
mm.
think about the reasons that people do not leverage AI, but even HubSpot, you always get to a place where they do not trust it yet,
Mm.
right? And it doesn't matter. This trust can be built in one day or 1 year, right? If you don't hit that trust milestone, right, nothing's going to matter. So progress happens when these conditions to create trust align, not based on somebody's calendar, like, ever.
And again, I mean, this one has so many correlates with with the way that we work. Take any technical development job and any integration that we do on a day, well, a week to week basis, and the ones that work, the ones that are good, the ones that are optimal, turn out the best, are the ones where the client trusts you. That you've agreed milestones. You said this thing is going to do this, and it's going to do this, and it's going to do this. And then, when you come back to them halfway through and say, well, we didn't we didn't anticipate this thing happening, or you weren't able to surface this requirement at the time. That the whole thing is, we all do it all the time, and if you're lucky, you stay within the time scope, but that's rare. But almost invariably, you'll end up with a product that looks radically different from where you started. That's just the way of things today. These things are so complicated. You don't, as a contractor, you don't find a better way of doing something and then say to the client, "Oh, well, I'm not going to do that because that wasn't in the original scope." You just can't do that anymore. You can't. You go back to them and you say, "Forget everything. We need to start again. Like, so and so's launched this tool, or such and such has been developed, or ChatGPT can do this, Claude can do that, wherever the thing's going to be." You're being unfair to yourself and to the client by rigorously sticking to the original path. So it
Yeah,
is, but on the other hand, again, you fix that. This one makes me very itchy, saying smart goals. We don't use smart goals, or the trust-based milestones. That's what I love about this. As we move towards completion of a project or a relationship, contract, whatever it's going to be, I much prefer the idea of, okay, guys, we're going to get to the point where 90% of our team use HubSpot. That's a milestone. That's what, and we can measure that, and we can get there, and it might take us 4 weeks, 8 weeks, or 12 weeks. We don't know, but we're going to continue to work to that. And if it becomes stymied, if it becomes like really much more difficult than we anticipate, which it will, by the way, we can adjust the workload accordingly. So you have to have it. I'd be very interested
yeah,
in examining this one through the lens of non-technical work. More traditionally, where smart has really stood the test of time. But for what we
yeah,
do, and what anybody looking to embrace technology and looking to make the most out of AI, even as it is today, then it's 100%. It's nailed on. You cannot
yeah,
be hidebound. You just can't.
yeah. And I think that's a good point. And we're going to see it, right? Because as AI makes its way in as an infrastructure, traditional, like, time-based activities are getting disrupted, like, everywhere you look, even in the manufacturing space. And when you have customers coming together from their expectations of AI moving things faster, and they're not going to understand why things take a long time. And that's where I love the nuance that I just discovered and this runs through all of these. Like none of these are likely to be just get rid of it. It has no value, right? But SMART goals, all you have to do is change the T from time-based to trust-based,
Mm.
right? And literally now it's going to be more valuable for you
Yep.
in this age that we're living in. That's the kind of nuance that we're going to see in most of these, right? Next one, let's see here. Like, let's do the measure twice,
Yeah, yeah.
cut, uh,
I love this one
cut
because
once.
my father used to tell me, he used to say this every time we used to do something together, like DIY or working with wood or plumbing or anything, and it wasn't much of it. But he used to drum this into me all the time. So I love this particular. I'll say it myself. I'll say it to my kids.
Yeah,
Um, but it's the constraint, yeah, because material is expensive. You do not want to throw it away and start again. In fact, you may not be able to throw it away and start again
yeah,
unless you can. and when
right.
you and when you can just delete the app and rebuild from scratch, or sorry, I stole your
This
thunder there.
No, this is where it gets exciting to think about, and it's hard to connect all the dots. That's why I'm here. But when Google is doing material science research, right, they are researching ways around a lot of the scarcity we have around hard materials that exist in nature that we know work better, but aren't always easy to come by. And so they're trying to actively work around this constraint where materials are expensive, mistakes are permanent, precision before action saves resources, right? Well, what's changed, when cutting is cheap, right? I mean, and there's lots of home improvement scenarios where you get extra screws and you get just extra stuff just coming in the box, right? That's already down this path, or you can undo, iterate, and try again without significant cost, right? And this idea of shipping it like quickly, like perfectionism is what gets in the way,
Yeah,
right?
this is the really interesting idea here. The speed of learning beats precision of planning. Is a fascinating idea, but perfectionism becomes the risk. I see this again as a D type. The personality that I am. I'm probably underprepared for any typical situation because I will jump in. Um, and I get very frustrated working with people who need to dot the I's and cross the T's, who want to look and look again, measure the people who want to measure twice and cut once because they've already cut and have already moved on to the next one. So this one really applies to me, appeals to me. But I've seen this also where perfectionism really is a risk because beyond that, it creates an enormous amount of anxiety, enormous amount of friction within the organization, an enormous amount of it just slows things up and it can cause real harm. My son who's autistic, I've mentioned before, he suffers with perfectionism. What the hell does that mean? Well, what that means is it makes him so anxious he won't even attempt some tasks because he knows he's going to make a mistake. And I appreciate, that we're all on a spectrum, right? Autism is an extreme version of that, I guess, or that's an extreme. But how many people are in that boat where they won't do a thing because they don't know that they can, or they're afraid to try? They don't want to look stupid. This is why I think this is so exciting, Chris, because it's outside of even our world of work. These principles apply because the world is changing. We're not all working 9 till 5 anymore, and we don't all have to troop off to the factory and go to the factory school to be kept out of the way for 9 till 3, and then do an exam that leads us to another exam that leads us to another exam that leads us to university that gives us an exam that nobody cares about anymore. The world is completely changing. So learning this stuff is vital, I think. Just like learning, what we're talking about here is creativity, isn't it? You can argue that all of these come under let's be creative. And I think that's the solution to a lot of the problems we have today. because the old ways don't work. You see it everywhere in politics, geopolitical situations all over the world. What goes on in the US? What's going on in Australia? What's going on in the UK? The old ways of working don't fix these things anymore. They just don't. If they ever did, we've got to get more creative. We've got to take more risks. We've got to measure once and iterate, and maybe start again because we can. Go for it. Go for it. I've lost your sound, Chris. Can you hear me?
You got me. Yeah.
There you go. You're back.
I was muted.
Ah.
Yeah, I all these constraints, and then how we respond to the constraints is like one big like reduced creativity package,
Yep.
right? That if you can unlock right now is everything. And this next one, I mean, I've been on about this one for a while, and now I'm starting to find the words to like make it make sense. Where the power of just showing up every day is overwhelmingly like the way I see people talking about, less of the prepped and planned and more of just the like trying to add value every day is significant. But again, I would never have termed it like this because I do believe this is a daily habit and routine that I've created. It's just way different, right? So the constraint repetition builds mastery, consistent effort compounds, habits automated the hard work of showing up. What's changed? Rigid routines can become containers for yesterday's work. When the right work changes daily, routine becomes productive procrastination. The new reality, consistent presence, not consistent output. The discipline is in showing up ready. The work itself stays fluid.
And the work you must direct the work, not have the work directing you. So
yes,
this is where we came in, right? Those years ago that we first started talking about AI, and I remember, and a conversation that stuck with me, is this idea. Imagine if the busy work, right? Imagine if the production of things went away. Imagine we don't have to produce anything anymore. And we see it already, the impacts that AI is having on things like the legal profession and so on and so on. When you don't, now, clearly, for anybody who is watching, clearly there's nuance to this as well, right? There are issues even with the statement I'm about to make. But when you can go into your AI and you can ask it for the precedents, ask it for the rulings, ask it for the insight, ask it for the thing, what it won't do for you is it doesn't have the genius, the inspiration. It doesn't have the ability to react to the manufacturing that it's done, the thing that it's produced in the same way that you can and a human can. So give that example of building an app earlier. All I added to it was the insight, the experience of being a 50-odd-year-old human who's got some knowledge of the world, so when it said a thing, I could counter it with, well, what about this perspective or that perspective? I'm not doing any work, literally none of the work. And the people who are going to be good in this, people like Nico and yourself, are people who are increasingly experienced with the different stuff that gets thrown up all the time. The more of that gets thrown up, the more you'll be able to respond to it. So you don't have to make anything anymore. Or imagine if you don't have to make anything. Imagine we've got some kind of Enterprise, USS Enterprise, Star Trek Enterprise fabricator in the lounge, and you can go in and program in your breakfast, or literally we don't have to make any. What are we even going to be for? How many people are kind of value themselves based on their productivity, based on their what they give to their firm or to their community or wherever. And it's huge. These are massive philosophical questions, and yeah, you can imagine.
It will be the barrier.
Totally.
That most people have to overcome.
Because
figuring out like
this is what we've learned.
Yeah, figuring out what makes you happy from a th- this is my purpose perspective, and not this is what I have to do every day to make money perspective,
Yeah.
is going to be massive. And that's a lot of the reason I do all the content I do, including, Value First Humans with George and his superhuman framework and all that stuff. You run into this point where it's like, it should be so obvious that you would want to do joyful things like every day, but people, like, we live in a world where you're not allowed.
Mhm.
You're not allowed, right? And like, uh, that was a good setup as you were talking about this. The like the ability to create, like, with speed. Um, and I think the HubSpot ecosystem has been suffering from this for a while, as HubSpot, like, has moved so fast. There's lots of reasons not to batch your work,
Yep.
but when it starts to create content, like, okay, so context switching was expensive. Batching similar tasks saved cognitive overhead. What's changed? AI handles much of the context. What you lose in batching, which is responsiveness to the moment, right, may cost more than what you save. And I have a specific example I'll share. But the new reality, real time responsiveness may beat batched efficiency. Match your rhythm to what's alive, not what's scheduled. God damn, it's so good, Claude. Um, uh, yeah, we've been talking about scoring a lot and signal recognition. We've got a workshop coming up on Wednesday about, okay, we've had countless episodes and series about why and what, and even how, from a theoretical perspective. On Wednesday, we're getting into HubSpot. Even later today, with Casey and Riley, after this, we're going to start building some stuff in HubSpot, because it's all about, can you ask HubSpot to capture the right signals that allow you to behave in this way and be real time responsive, right? And so if you do, and by the way, HubSpot's already got buyer intent signals,
Mhm.
right, coming into your portal,
Mhm.
right? And imagine if, as a business, you're able to sit down and decide, oh, every time there's a post on LinkedIn about an article about this thing, and we're there to respond quickly, we have valuable relationships formed from there. We get business, whatever is important to you. One thing that does make me happy is I'm hearing more and more conversations becoming a KPI of interest,
Mhm.
for a lot of organizations, which is right. That's what it needs to be, not leads, conversations. But when we show up that quickly to a LinkedIn post, we're first to respond, and we start a conversation. Let's say we close like 80% of that business, right? You have the tools now
Mhm.
in HubSpot, and lots of other tools that can allow you that, like, to be able to see the LinkedIn post, measure it, respond, measure what happens after that, right? But if you're in a habit of, oh, I gotta get my outbound calling done from 10 to 12, right? I don't have time for LinkedIn,
Mhm.
right? Naturally, you've forced yourself, I can't do anything but call right now. So there could be like 10 more articles published on LinkedIn right now. And we know that it's a great idea for us to respond to those articles, and we're not, or our best person can't, because they're supposed to be making calls right now.
Yep. It's a brilliant example. And you can't, no, nobody would argue with that. And in fact, you feel the truth of it. Yeah, we've done it. We've all done it. We've all responded to articles asking for help. Funnily enough, LinkedIn started showing me them again. Somebody's obviously tweaked the algorithm again. But I've seen a couple of. I'm thinking about changing my CRM and so on and so on. Um, if only there was a way uh, to find out what was going on on LinkedIn, all of the world, all at well, yeah, there is. We've, as you said, we've already got it, and we're blinded to it by the consistency, by the let's keep doing what we've always done. And that's what it boils down to, isn't it? If you always do what you always did, you're always going to get what you always got. Well, I mean, there's another one that should be on you. That's not the case anymore either, because It's just diminishing returns. If you always do what you always did, you're just going to get smaller and smaller. Everything's going to diminish. It's fascinating. Say the impact of this stuff, and particularly the human side of it. I'm with you and George on my interests are much more about how we're going to behave. How do we adapt to this world? What becomes valuable to us? And it's no wonder there's so many dystopian visions. For every kind of uh, heavenly vision, the dystopian version of it, and you can sort of see why.
Yeah. And like, I think we'll finish up on this last one because a lot of it speaks to a lot of this change that we're suggesting. Eat the frog first. The constraint willpower depletes throughout the day. Do the hard thing early when energy is highest. What's changed? The right hard thing isn't always clear at 7 a.m. Sometimes it reveals itself at 2 p.m. Presence reveals priority. A new reality? Eat the frog when you see the frog. Don't force yesterday's frog onto today's plate. And there's been another example that I've talked about a couple times on this show is this realization from a leader to say, hey, like process management and documentation is not as hard as it used to be. Like we don't have to wait till the end of year audit, to the end of quarter review of the quality management system. We're here right now feeling this pain. We're going to get together for 15 minutes. We're going to record everything we say. And then by the end of the next hour, we will have a brand new documented process, right? He didn't get there until he experienced the ability to do that. But that is exactly what we're talking about here, where if he had like so many of us say like it's kind of like if you can't get it done in 2 minutes, like you gotta put it on the backlog shelf, right? And then you catch up at the end of the day. Well, sometimes that opportunity presents itself to deal with something really important. And if you haven't, I think as a leader, if you can't get into this mindset and you can't make the space for your team to call like, hey, we need to deal with
This
this right
this is it.
now,
This is it.
right?
It's the misalignment, and as you know, we talk. Me and my firm, we talk a lot about adoption, and that adoption comes down to feedback loops for us. And there's nothing more frustrating than HubSpot, as a for instance, throwing up through its feedback loops, throwing up these pains or these frogs in real time, and them not getting even surfaced until the monthly or the quarterly business review, because the leadership of the organization works outside of HubSpot. This is what we find. This is what it always boils down to. And for HubSpot, swap any system. Anytime leadership brings something in to achieve a thing and then sit outside of it, delegate responsibility for it to IT or to a HubSpot partner or a Salesforce consultant, whoever it's going to be, it's a waste of time for exactly this reason. These things provide so much productivity. The ability to coach your team in the sales workspace is unrivaled. As a sales manager of 30 years, I have never seen as cool a bit of kit as the sales workspace and the sales performance workspace in HubSpot. They're fantastic because I can live with my rep who's in the office on the phone or remote on a Zoom or whatever, talk to them about a now issue now, with the context, with the evidence, with the with precise data, not like something I made up or something I feel. And when management are outside of it, this is why our cure for adoption is to teach leadership to run the business through HubSpot. It's really as simple as that. It's not so much about the training and the enablement and the processes and the documentations and using Supered and all these other things, all of which clearly help. It's pointless unless the leadership is in the system and running things in the system, or in other words, in the mechanism of productivity. using AI. What's the point of your business utilizing AI if your leadership doesn't even know what it's doing, doesn't know what's
Yeah.
possible, doesn't need to be realistic, pragmatic about it, doesn't know what to look out for, doesn't know where you're going to get tripped up.
Yep.
And as we've become enabled by software, particularly, and as that software takes on genuinely, hyper speed with AI, leadership will be more and more exposed. If leadership doesn't know what's going on, you'll fail. You'll simply
Yeah.
fail.
And man, it's such an easy solve too. It's an easy, how do I say this? It's been easy for me to get buy-in uh, on these, and we haven't chatted in a while. So I've had some more success with the concept of unified customer view
Mm,
as a way to pull a leader back in when they're trying to delegate their responsibility,
mm.
right? When they say, oh, I've got some great people. Even they do all the right things. Like, this is why I hired this group of people. I know that they can do this implementation, so I'm not going to be on these meetings. But I trust that they will get the.
In
Like,
the
that's a
old
trap,
in the old world, it feels like the right thing to do, doesn't it? It feels like
right?
I'll get myself out of the way. I won't mess things. I won't ask any stupid questions.
Right.
I'll leave it up to the
And
kids. I'll leave it up to the young
right,
people who know what's going on.
yeah. And what they miss in that is that at the end of the day, they have the authority over the rest of the organization that needs to move to get this stuff done. And that's where these outcomes, like, if you want to give some, and I think a lot of our implementation that we're going to go into in January and beyond is how to get to these views of unified customer view, unified revenue view, unified business context, and unified team enablement. These are 4 pillars that serve the whole org, and they're tangible, not super measurable. Like, it's just so different in that it's a yes or no answer. Do we have a unified customer view or not?
Mm.
Yeah. Can we get everybody in the room that serves the customer and they can look at one view and not think about, oh, I saw this post on LinkedIn a couple days ago. There was some activity. It started a conversation. I'm not seeing any of that here. Right. Okay. We're not. All right. How do we get it in there if it's so important to us? Right. And that commitment to that outcome, those outcomes, those unified views are 100% in the control of the business. Right. And it has been a forcing function to pull the leader back in and say, no, you have to communicate to the rest of the organization how important this is for the business. And when you get that, just buy in some kind of way, every conversation around what needs to happen just gets easier. And a lot of the how to's, definitely what the workshop is on Wednesday, is about, like, how do we create these views in a meaningful way? Because, by the way, all the views I just mentioned, probably easier and more affordable than ever
Mm.
using HubSpot,
Mm.
because it does the communication and visibility, better than any other tool. So if you've got people showing up and in response to these, like, changes, well, how do I see this, or how do I know about this? So what I'm coaching a lot of my colleagues through right now is, like, it's not easy, but all you can do is say unified view. Like, you got to come back to one of those as soon as you get buried in the, oh, well, we'll make this view and we'll send out these emails and these notifications. Like, you lose them,
Yeah,
right?
you want they don't need that layer. A leader within an organization doesn't need to understand necessarily all of the ins and outs. So there's an instinct there that's probably right. I need to stay out of the granular aspects of this. But the point that they fail to understand in say they, these leaders, is that aspect, what you're talking about there, let's say move into a unified view, is the transformation. That's the transformation that they're actually trying to achieve. So not having any part of it is, you know, ask about fit. Putting the cart before the horse.
Nonsensical. Yeah.
Exactly. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever because, and you get it. So think about it, Mr. Leader, if you're watching this and you've delegated that task out, or you've delegated that workshop out, or you're getting out of the way of your people or whatever, that transformation is never going to happen because they will not have the authority within the organization to make the changes that you would be able to make in order to achieve the unified view. The unified view is the transformation itself. That's HubSpot's not the transformation. HubSpot is not a strategy. The unified view is the strategy. However you get there, you have to get there. And how many times do we see leadership do this? Delegate HubSpot out to somebody, and the poor old admin gets covered with all of the poop. It comes from both ends. Why doesn't this work? Why aren't my reports working? Why isn't my data where it should be? And then when they're trying to enforce that with the reps, they get it from the other way. Well, the reason your data your data is not where it should be is because you are outside of the system.
Yes.
Because you're not looking at the unified view. You're not spotting the problems, conceptual problems before they become problems, and therefore communicating to your organization the larger why we're doing this whole thing, the transformation piece.
Yep.
It's
yeah.
It's a passion. It's an absolute passion. This is how the future will happen. Once we get this, once we understand this piece.
Yes, for sure. And like as we wrap, if you're wondering why hasn't this been a thing before, or like for one, I'm coming to terms with like it's easier to market a unified customer view, but nobody's selling it or implementing it that way in regards to HubSpot. But it hasn't existed inside of a system. It exists inside of our heads as we go to serve the need of the business. So customer facing team, they have to create it in the moment, and either they're using memory or they're getting it from all these other systems, and then they present it as a unified understanding so that they can do their job. CFOs have these ridiculous spreadsheets that they like put together that gives them this unified financial view of the business. And they ask everybody else to do all this work to say, what's the forecast look like, and blah, 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 right? Unified business context, that's coming from the leaders as they put their board slide decks together, right? And try to unify an understanding of what's going on in the business. And, team enablement is just like emails, all the different communication channels that we use are what truly create the unified, team enablement experience there. So it's all existed. It just has never it's been rare to find it successfully done in the system. And that's where, yes, HubSpot's great, but AI is the layer that will allow you to.
That's quite right. That's a very good,
right?
Very good point. And I was just thinking as you were speaking, a lot of people get held back by the systems, and understandably, because there's this idea of a data lake. Everybody seems to be talking about that. Certainly in the UK again, where we pull our HubSpot and our QuickBooks and our Airtable, and we pull everything into the data lake, and then we manipulate the data lake. Which is quite sound. But all inverted commas, all we'll need to do actually is just plug those things into the AI. But just go back a step before that. You don't need all of that information either. The CFO has all that information in case they get asked a question they can't answer. Right? That's why they've got that information. Are they looking at that information? Are they buggery? They've probably got one or two metrics, like every good leader, one or two metrics that gives them what they need. The rest of it is interesting. The rest of it is let's have a look at it. The rest of it is, as you say, if a CFO gets asked by the chairman or gets asked by the chief exec for a piece of information, they want to know that they've got it. It's redundancy almost, So this is another aspect of that view, and why the view is transformational in the business, because the leadership must decide what the view is, not what it can be, and not to
Yeah.
roll it out as big as it gets, to make it as small as practicable, as small as they can possibly achieve their aims with. That's what the leadership is about. And it comes back to the creativity that we were talking about earlier. Let's not just grind all the numbers. Let's become inspired to understand which of the numbers are really important to us and to our customers. That's the transformational piece, not just having table after table after table that you constantly grind through. That's the whole bloody point. We want to be free of that stuff. We want to be empowered, enabled. We want to be set free from the industrial age thinking. And 100%,
Never
you're
been
quite
easier.
right. AI is absolutely the way to achieve that, to bring it back.
Yes, it's never been easier, never been more possible. You just have to think outside of
Yeah,
these old hat constraints, and we'll be here to help you do that. Um, so this has been a fun series that we're gonna continue, after the holiday. And I thank you so much for joining us on this journey,
I love it.
Tony.
Absolute pleasure. It's. I hope we've helped, and I say, I hope we continue to after Christmas, after the holidays, and we'll see you all again.
Yes, sir. We'll see you next time. Have a great day, everybody.